at the San Francisco Public Library's Business Science and Technology Center. We're really excited about today's presentation topic, which is brought to you through the library's partnership with the Office of Financial Empowerment and Balance. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to share some news about a great upcoming event and to provide some additional information about accessing other personal finance resources available through the library. So we are thrilled to announce our annual Financial Planning Day, which will take place this year on Saturday, October 18th. This year's event will include opportunities for a free one-on-one session with a certified financial planner and a series of workshops on investing, recent changes to tax law and how it might affect you, property taxes and intergenerational transfers, behavioral finance, and free resources available through the City and County of San Francisco and the Office of Financial Empowerment. The one-on-one counseling sessions and the workshops will take place at the main library, with some of those workshops also live streamed on Zoom for remote participation. Head to sfpl.org/financial-planning to get more information and to register for a one-on-one session or a workshop. To find out more about all of the business and finance resources that we offer, including other upcoming events, head to the library's homepage where you can find us under the Research and Learn tab. You can also go there directly at sfpl.org/BST. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact us through our chat reference service, which can be found on SFPL's homepage, which is sfpl.org. Look for the Chat with Us button like you see there, or scroll down to the Contact Us link. You can also email our department directly at bizscitech@sfpl.org or give us a call at 415-557-4488. And no need to write all this down. I'll post our contact information and other links in the chat in just a moment. If you're interested in recordings of our past programs, visit SFPL's YouTube channel. Our personal finance, small business, and jobs and careers recordings can be found at on.sfpl.org/success. And finally, I'd also encourage you to sign up for our once-a-month email newsletter to find out about free resources and upcoming programs. It's just one email a month, and we will never, absolutely never share your information with anyone. Sign up with the QR code or go to bit.ly/SFPL newsletter. Okay, that is it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Andrea, who will provide information about additional resources and introduce today's presentation. Thanks, Andrea.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for San Francisco Financial Counseling's webinar, Mastering the Gig Economy. And we are really lucky to be able to put these on for you all for free in partnership with the San Francisco Public Library. San Francisco Financial Counseling is one of the flagship programs of the city's Office of Financial Empowerment, which is a unit under the umbrella of the Treasurer's Office. The work of our office is to convene, innovate, and advocate to strengthen the economic security and mobility for all San Franciscans. Again, my name is Andrea Yee, and I am the Financial Capability Program Manager for our office, and I lead the San Francisco Financial Counseling Program. San Francisco Financial Counseling, formerly known as Smart Money Coaching, provides free one-on-one financial counseling to anyone who lives, works, or receives services in San Francisco, and that's regardless of immigration status. San Francisco Financial Counseling Services are funded by multiple San Francisco city departments and are provided by different service providers who have expertise in providing financial capability services to various communities in the city. Balance is one of those service providers, and our financial counselors joining us today are from Balance. Before I go ahead and introduce them, just wanted to touch on a couple of housekeeping items. Go ahead, and this is going to be an interactive presentation, so please feel free to share your responses and reactions in the chat. You can go ahead and submit any questions through the chat. I think there's a Q&A, but it's probably easier if everyone just uses the chat. and we'll do our best to answer those questions as they come in, or we'll hopefully have a few minutes at the end to address them as well. As you probably heard when you entered, this session is being recorded, and we'll make sure to get the recording and slides and any handouts and things available to you all who registered for this event. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our two presenters today. We have Howard Feitel Jr., who's a senior certified financial counselor and has been with Balance for I think over 27 years now, and has worked in the financial services sector for almost 30 years. Oh my goodness, Howard. That's amazing. Howard's advice to his clients is to not focus on your past failures, but to build on your current successes. We also have Chris Flores here, who is our lead certified financial counselor. And he is a financial counselor and educator with a background in financial services, accounting, and nonprofit work. He thoroughly enjoys problem solving with clients and celebrating their wins, both big and small. So yeah, Howard, Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. We're so excited to be here presenting this new webinar that we put together called Mastering the Gig Economy. And I guess before we get started, I'd like to kind of ask everybody like why you came to this webinar and what you're hoping to get out of it. So if you want to just go ahead and put some things into the chat. And Chris, let me know if anyone puts anything in our chat.
Will do. Yeah, folks, again, I just want to encourage your participation here. The more you participate, the more you'll get out of it. All right, we have some responses here. One participant is saying, oop, do you know anyone that has knowledge of different transfers and ROI or Roth and how this works? Another participant is saying, her daughter got laid off, so she's looking for gig opportunities. Another participant is saying they would like to learn how to budget and invest. Let's see. Another participant is saying, I worked for nearly 40 years, am retired currently, and would like to work on a gig basis. Fantastic. All right. Somebody else is saying they are here to learn and understand new job capabilities. Another participant is saying, what is the best gig to have in the gig economy? And then finally, we have here participant is saying, trying to make the most out of the gig economy since the market has changed recently with the current financial status. That's the feedback we have so far, Howard.
Okay, great. So I just want to start by saying this webinar was created for informational purposes, and it's not meant to substitute as advertisement or counseling. So just talking a little bit about the gig economy, by the end of 2022, the US economy has seen about 70 million gig workers, so quite a few. Though this type of work has always existed in certain trades, the gig economy, which comes with pluses and minuses, and there's several responsibilities and concepts that must be understood. So we're going to be covering all of those today. So let's talk about what is the gig economy. So the gig economy, I would say a good definition is a sharing economy where people earn income by providing on-demand services, work, or even goods. So a large portion of the gig economy derives from digital platforms, including mobile applications and websites, but might also include freelance work in a myriad of industries. So I want to talk about some examples. So really what the role of the business is to provide the platform for the worker to connect the customer's request to the gig worker who will fulfill the request. So most transactions are made through communication on a digital platform, such as an app or website. So let's talk a little bit about some of the businesses that provide services. So does anyone know, for example, type of services such as ride sharing services. And you can just put those in the chat. And then Chris, let me know if we have any answers. Just want to get some examples of ride sharing services.
Yeah, so Uber popped up here. Definite
Mhm.
top of mind. I believe they are located in San Francisco, so that makes sense. Um, okay. Another person is saying, I'm starting over again with a gig in small business after COVID. Wondering if there are any resources for help with necessities such as a laptop. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, Uber, Lyft, Via, Juno. There's even those driverless cars. I would say if anyone's seen them. What about some delivery services? What are some like delivery services that people may use? You could just put those in the chat.
We have a DoorDash. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one participant responded to the previous question about the driverless cars with Waymo.
Yeah.
hmm Besides DoorDash, is there any other delivery
Yeah.
gigs?
Uber Eats,
Uber Eats.
Instacart,
Well,
Grubhub, some of
hmm
those, I would say. And then what about crafts and handmade item marketplaces where people might buy some things like online, or they might be having people sell things?
Or somebody said Walmart deliveries, Etsy,
Yeah.
Etsy and Revelry.
Yeah. There's the Amazon Marketplace now. I've actually myself sold a few things through that. And I believe that's through Facebook. Um, there's some on-demand labor and repair services that would probably also be included. Things like TaskRabbit, Thumbtack, Porch. I've actually used TaskRabbit myself for the first time, and that was really successful. Other things could be like property and space rentals. So you have things like Verbo, Airbnb, Agoda. So these are, some other examples. So thank you for um, sharing those different companies and stuff. So what about, I'm going to just kind of ask the group, what do you think might be some advantages of doing this gig work? So what have you heard like from people who might be doing gig work or things that you might think of that might be some advantages?
Howard, somebody's saying here, controlling their own time.
Mm-hmm.
You set the time, work your own schedule. Work-life balance. There's some feedback here. Another participant is agreeing. Becoming one's own boss is listed here.
Great. So yeah, so some of the advantages of like doing gig work, I think somebody mentioned like autonomy and control. So you have more control over your work compared to like traditional employees. So you can choose different projects you want to work on, sometimes negotiate pay rates, work with multiple clients, having more control over your work schedules. And then someone said work-life balance, perfect. Maybe being able to spend time like with your families. Um, and the gig work can also serve as immediate income when you might be between jobs. And it could come in handy when there's no other option if you're trying to, make ends meet. So even doing part-time gig work, it's, truly an advantage to anyone maybe looking to expedite paying off debt, accomplishing any financial goals that you might have. You have the opportunity to work on a diverse range of projects and tasks. And sometimes gig workers can potentially earn more money than traditional employees, especially if they have like in-demand skills or expertise at any of these areas. Um, so another question I kind of want to pose to the group is, what are some differences that you might see between gig work and like a traditional work? working like a 9 to 5 job. I think we probably touched maybe on some of these already. Um,
And how, while those are coming in, and a participant responded to the previous question, and this is interesting. It's not on your slide here. They said to maximize your natural talents or hobbies to make money for you. So I thought that was a nice angle on it. But for your current question, somebody replied, you were responsible to pay all taxes. Another participant is saying unpredictable to sustain the income. Another response here is in a 9 to 5 job, you have to be in person at a site. Another response here is no paid sick days as a disadvantage.
Okay. Yeah, and I put kind of a slide up here, kind of giving gig work versus, like traditional work. They have here that gigs are short term, not necessarily. I've seen a lot of, even for example, Uber drivers, that's their, full-time job, that's what they do. But initially, this kind of gig work is looked at sometimes as short term, really having a flexible schedule. You can choose your, schedule. You're paid per gig, for example, like Uber, like per ride. Um, but you have to use your own resources, whether it be like your car, computer, mobile device. Um, but traditional work, as you can see here, is considered to be, more long term. You have usually a set schedule, you're paid by the day, and you're using the company resources. So that's kind of some things, some differences between the two. So let's talk about maybe what are some challenges of gig work. So one of the things that I hear from a lot of people could be the lack of job security, just because typically gig workers do not have job security, which means they may not have a steady stream of income. So, if sometimes a company needs to reduce their payroll, a gig worker's contract may be at risk. And then gig workers also do not have access to traditional employee benefits like health insurance or retirement plans. And we're going to talk about those later in this presentation. And since workers do not receive healthcare and retirement benefits as a gig worker, it can be difficult to feel secure in the gig economy. And sometimes there is an inconsistent workload. So this can lead to financial instability. And there may also need to constantly search for new projects or clients to kind of maintain their income. And then someone did bring up before about taxes. So that can be a little bit challenging, estimating and paying taxes that are associated with gig work or being self-employed. That also can be challenging. And in many cases, I've seen a lot of gig workers that, I counsel and coach, they're not able to set money aside and make payments throughout the year for taxes. So keep in mind that not paying your taxes or paying the IRS late can result in penalties and interest, leaving the gig worker with an even higher tax obligation. So these can be like some of the challenges of doing gig work. So as a gig worker or independent contractor, you're responsible for purchasing your own health insurance, because gig work seldom includes health insurance coverage. So one of the things is you really want to look at, ways to maybe obtain, insurance, determining your eligibility. So depending upon your income and other factors, you might be eligible for government subsidized health insurance through programs like Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act. So it's really important to kind of research your health insurance options. And one of the things is through the, you can research health insurance through ACA, the marketplace that has private health insurance providers, things of that nature. I just had a client that just enrolled, for example, on Covered California, and he's actually has coverage and not paying. He has a zero payment, based on his income and other factors. But you also want to, compare the plans and the costs. So once you've kind of identified, your health insurance options, compare the plans, determine which one's going to be the best fit for you. And obviously, it's very important to make sure that that's going to fit into your budget. And when you enroll in a plan through the ACA marketplace or directly through the insurance provider, keep in mind it's going to be very important that you pay your premiums and pay them on time to ensure that your coverage remains active. And really stay informed. Keep up with any changes or updates to your health insurance plan. Make sure, you're using the coverage to receive the necessary medical care. And then very important that enrollment takes place every year on November 1st. So that's like very important. And you can go to healthcare.gov website. Now there is a special enrollment period. So if you have like a life event, marriage, having a baby, loss of coverage, then you may be able to enroll on something else. And then it's really important, as everybody probably knows, to prioritize your health and well-being, especially as an independent contractor, because really having adequate health insurance is really a crucial, part of that. So this is where we come in, really as financial coaches and stuff. Budgeting is really like important, especially because gig workers may have irregular income, may not be stable. So it's really important, that you look at things like, having a savings plan in place for months when you may not be working as much. To basically, build a safety net, no matter what the future is going to bring. Very important that when you're, looking at a budget, and this is what, again, we help clients with when we're looking at, somebody who might be a gig worker, starting with your income. Determine maybe how much money you're earning on an average each month, from your gig work. It's always good to kind of take an average because there may be some months that might be slower than other months. I would probably say looking at, the last 3 to 6 months is probably what I might look at. Some people I've worked with may even look at their taxes, from the previous year. That's another good way to maybe get an average since, income can be sporadic or challenging. And also when you're looking at a budget, you really want to track and prioritize your expenses. So we really highly recommend, looking at a list of all your expenses. So including your fixed expenses like rent or car payments, but also things, don't forget, like variable expenses like groceries and entertainment. And then you really want to look at your needs versus your wants. So it's really important to kind of categorize these two things. So looking at what would be like a need, something in your budget that would be a need, if you want to put that in the chat. So something that's crucial. Do we have any responses?
Not at the moment. Okay, food. Somebody said
Exactly.
food.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So food, housing, transportation, these would really be like needs. And if you look at wants, what would be maybe some wants?
As far as needs, somebody said a cell phone, and somebody else said retirement for needs. No wants yet. Coming in here.
So I would say like wants, things like eating out, entertainment, these wouldn't necessarily be needs that you
We
need, for example.
we have a want here, definitely right up your alley, Howard. Vacation. Vacation. Going out. So that's what somebody put here.
Yeah, definitely, things that we don't necessarily need, but, maybe want, and, saving up that also, and really try to set spending limits. determine how much money you want to spend on each category of expenses and set, spending limits according to your budget. So things like if you decide you want to limit your spending on entertainment to $50 a month, make sure that when you're looking at your budget, it is something that's going to be like affordable, and very important to adjust your budget as needed. So if you might find that you're consistently overspending in a certain category, you may want to consider adjusting your budget to reflect your actual expenses.
Uh,
So,
Howard, another participant here said they want to have a secure retirement instead of paying a bill or paying for a 1K.
okay. So let's kind of get some ideas about what should be included in your budget.
Howard, I just wanted to chime in. Jonathan put in the chat a response to a question earlier
Mm-hmm.
regarding setting up a LLC structure. So I don't know if folks are not looking at the chat. And as Jonathan indicated earlier, there's a financial planning day coming up where those sort of topics will be covered. Um, and there's one in particular, I think that maybe addresses that, focusing on creative freelancers and creative small businesses. But business structures like LLCs will also be covered during that financial planning day. And just some more responses here. Um, so somebody said all the ways you can earn income and all the things you spend money on should be included, including cash you may withdraw from an ATM or cash earned for working.
Okay. So maybe let's maybe put together a little bit of a budget. So everybody, if you want to kind of put down in the chat, maybe, or you can do this kind of like on your own, or, come to see us as financial coaches if you don't have a budget or want to kind of like review your budget. But I would say things that we're looking at that are really important when we're looking at our budget. Number one is looking at your monthly income. So that's really important. So, whether or not you have a traditional job and you have a set amount of money, that you might have coming in, or if you have a job that might be on call, that would be something more that we want to kind of probably look at averages when we're looking at, your income to try to start out with. What else can we look at? Sometimes we may be getting, public benefits. So maybe we're not working. So those are things that we're gonna, incorporate in someone's budget, whether or not they might be receiving things like, CalFresh, CalWorks. So those are all things that we're gonna kind of look at. And, things are gonna change, so I'm really like a big advocate when we're looking at budgets. A lot of things in the budget are not set in stone. So you definitely want to have flexibility like in your budget as changes, arise. So, starting with your income, and then we're going to look at like monthly expenses. We just kind of talked a little bit about, needs versus wants. So I would, sit down and kind of start listing, what your, monthly expenses are. And that's one of the big things that we do again in our, counseling sessions. We're going to sit down with you and we're going to, put together a budget together, looking at things like starting out with, fixed expenses. How much do I pay for rent? How much do I average maybe on groceries or, eating out? And sometimes, that can be a little bit challenging, because we may not be tracking our expenses. So I usually, advise clients maybe for the next, couple of months, just start tracking your expenses. Look at, maybe what you're spending on food. Whether or not you want to save your receipts, is a good way. Sometimes if I'm paying with cash, I have clients who keep a ledger for themselves. I know that sounds old school. Um, Actually, a lot of like banks now, they do have like their own tracking programs. So if you have like your debit card linked or like a credit card linked, what it will do is when you make those purchases, it'll try to categorize them for you, and then, we can take a look at, your statement and kind of see like what charges, are making and where they're going to. So I have some clients where we will work, to using like a specific credit card, and that will be the only credit card that they're going to use for food expenses. So that could be like one thing, to kind of look at. Um, Also, when you're looking at a budget, it's really important to try to factor in emergency savings. And usually when you're looking at a gig worker, they're, recommending somewhere between 6 to 12 months of essential living expenses just because your income can vary quite a bit. Usually, when we're putting together budgets for someone who has maybe like a traditional job, we're looking at, 3 to 6 months is usually like a good rule to kind of look at. And when we're looking at emergency savings, and I really had a conversation with just my last client that I was talking to, and the question came up about why would it be important maybe to have like a separate savings account? So I'm going to kind of pose that to the group. So why do you think it might be helpful to maybe have a separate savings account? Anything in the chat?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. So, I talk with
Oops.
my oh,
Here's
go
one.
ahead.
Keep track of what you are spending, is what one participant said.
Okay. I think, one of the good things I had mentioned to my client this morning about having like a separate savings account just for emergencies, it's something to try to put that money aside and not even think about it because, things can happen. I mean, you could get sick at work, lose your job. There's a lot of things that could happen. And I see it all the time, like with clients of mine. They're working, and I really stress, putting money aside for savings. Even if it's a little bit, $10, 15. Um, the recommended amount that they recommend is somewhere about 10% of your net income. But I've seen it so many times, like with a lot of my clients who lose their job or they have a contract job, and they're in the process of maybe trying to apply for unemployment. They may have to, start dipping in their savings, but they will tell me that they're so glad that we really focused on putting money aside for kind of like, a rainy day, especially with the economy the way it is today and like downsizing. And it's, a little bit more challenging. I just heard today, trying to find a job. There's a lot of like college, graduates, I just heard where, they're having challenges because they try to go to apply for a job, for example, and they get turned down because they don't have experience. So it's kind of like a catch 22. It's like, well, I need a job to get experience. But yeah, I just kind of heard that, this morning. So that's, to kind of get back to, the budgeting, I think that's really important to kind of, take a look at that. Um, and then I think somebody probably mentioned about like retirement. So in addition, really trying to save for like long term. Because the other thing is too, we see a lot of clients, and Chris can probably, confirm that, not only is it challenging to have savings, but even like retirement. Wouldn't you say, Chris? Do you see a lot of people saving for retirement or something really to kind of work on?
Yeah, it is very challenging. I see retirement as a form, a version of savings, but if, as you said, it's a long-term play, it's a long-term perspective. So, a lot of times we have clients that are dealing with immediate issues, and um, through the process, we'll help them to consider the longer term, but oftentimes it's just kind of getting past these immediate issues is what folks are focused on. But yeah, it is part of our role to reframe the perspective of folks and to help them to think of that long-term perspective. When you do retire, your life will be different at that point in time. So, it goes back to budgeting. What is your income and expenses at that point in time? How much will you need to sustain yourself? It's one question that can be asked when it comes to retirement planning. But, I do want to make very clear, we are not retirement planners. We recommend you speak to a investment professional in that space. The financial planning day coming up, it is, the certified financial planners will be there who can discuss these matters. And CFPs, they have a broad training, and they do obviously cover investments, but they also cover estate planning, taxes, and certain, the holistic areas of your financial life. So definitely recommend if you want to address those matters, sure, financial planners are definitely certified financial planners we highly recommend. And also another resource that the library does have is Advisors Give Back. I'll pop that link in the chat. But for folks who earn there are income and asset kind of limits, but if you fall within that, you can speak to a CFP, at no cost. It's a pro bono session.
Yeah, and
And
if you also want to write down letsmakeaplan.org, I think that that's really another good resource for
Mhm.
finding financial planners.
Okay.
But we kind of just listed, some of them here. As Chris mentioned, we're not financial planners, but just kind of like some simple things. There's like, I think somebody might have mentioned earlier about a Roth IRA. That's really like one of the easiest ways to kind of save for retirement. And this is like whether you have a regular job or you are living through gig work or self-employment. A traditional IRA is also a good option. If you earn more than the Roth IRA limit, though, or if you want to deduct your contributions earlier than 59 and a half. So a traditional IRA. There's also what they call a SEP, SEP IRA, which is a simplified employee pension. That's another way to save for retirement if you're a gig worker. All contributions you make as the employer rather than the employee. And so that's a little bit about that. There's also a simple IRA, and that stands for Savings Incentive Match Plan for employees. Um, so you can invest in one of those if you're like a gig worker or if you're a small business owner with 100 or fewer employees. And then there's also a solo 401k. That can also be an easy option for retirement planning. Um, it's kind of like similar to a regular 401k, but you make contributions on behalf of both the employee and the employer. And then the other thing I didn't want to forget about, because someone brought up about taxes. So you also, as a gig worker, definitely want to make sure that you look at and don't forget setting money aside for quarterly tax payments. And that would be things like, contributing towards Medicare, Social Security, things that like a traditional worker would have automatically taken out of their paycheck. A gig worker typically would want to be making quarterly tax payments. So if they don't have any issues like with the IRS. So just want to kind of give some kind of savings tips for gig workers. So since we kind of talked a little bit before, um, kind of some strategies that you can survive to when you have downtimes. Being a gig worker, we talked about having an emergency savings fund can help gig workers kind of navigate through these challenges because we talked about setting money aside for unexpected expenses. Car breaks down, you need to do repairs, especially if you're working for Uber and using your car and your car breaks down, that's, absolutely necessary that you're going to have to get it fixed. Um, so, since your income might not be consistent from month to month, definitely, be trying to put some money aside for like the slower months when you're not earning as much. And savings, consider using like an automatic savings plan such as an auto debit. So a direct deposit is really common with traditional work, but gig workers may not have that option, and they may have to rely on a paper check. But now a lot of things are done electronically anyways. But think about like if you're having your money transferred into your checking account, maybe doing like an automatic transfer to your savings, maybe a set amount, to try to get started. Um, and when you're talking about savings, be sure to set savings goals that include short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. So when we're looking at things like short-term goals, they're usually, goals that you want to take 12 months or less to achieve. And they usually tend to be like smaller amounts than your mid or long-term goals. Midterm goals, usually we estimate somewhere between 1 to 5 years to achieve, and long-term, like 5 years or more. So I have a lot of clients that might be looking at down the road, maybe purchasing a home. So those could be some, long-term goals as well. So someone had mentioned about, tax implications. And again, I just want to be very clear that we're not tax professionals. So, as independent contractors, gig workers are responsible for paying self-employment taxes. So that can include both the employer and employee portions I mentioned before of like Social Security and Medicare taxes. Um, so a gig worker may also be required to make estimated tax payments throughout the year to avoid any sort of penalties for underpayment to the government, to the state. So it's really, really important for gig workers to keep detailed records of their income and expenses in order to accurately calculate their tax liability. So earned income paid in any form, which is like cash payments, property, goods and services, or virtual currency must be reported. And this also includes income that was not reported on an information return, such as forms like 1099-K, 1099 miscellaneous, or W-2 or other income statement. So what are some kind of steps to managing taxes? Because obviously it is a little bit more challenging, as a gig worker or if you're an independent contractor and you're really responsible for managing your own taxes. So we just want to talk a little bit about some steps to help you manage your independent contractor taxes. So the first thing would be determine your tax obligations. So first of all, you need to determine what taxes you're responsible for paying. And typically as an independent contractor, you're going to be responsible for paying what they call a self-employment tax, and that's going to include Social Security and Medicare taxes. As we talked about before, very important to keep track of your income and expenses related to your independent contractor work. So that can include invoices, receipts, other financial records. And as we discussed previously, setting aside money for taxes, because as a gig worker, since you're responsible for paying your own taxes, it's really important to set money aside from each payment you receive to cover your tax obligations. And paying your estimated taxes quarterly, if you're required or want to do that, you should pay estimated taxes each quarter to ensure that you're staying up to date on your tax obligations. So as a gig worker or independent contractor, the deadlines for quarterly estimated tax payments are usually April, June, September, and January. And one of the most important things is don't forget to file your taxes. So file your tax returns. Or if you're not going to be able to do it, make sure that you ask for an extension. And since sometimes being a gig worker, hiring a tax professional, if you're kind of unsure about how to manage your taxes, as a gig worker or an independent contractor. So, that's something really that can be challenging, again, as a gig worker or independent contractor. And then
Uh,
once,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Howard, yeah, one participant made a note here that you can use an app to track expenses and
Mm-hmm.
deductible items like tolls, mileage, cell phone, cleaning supplies for work, anything related to that gig work. So, yeah, certainly there are multiple apps out there for that purpose.
Absolutely. And, choose a filing option. The IRS has a free file. There's also volunteer, income tax assistance sites, even like in San Francisco. There are some income restrictions. Um, you can also file your return by mail and just be really sure, keep up with any sort of tax law changes, um, things of that nature. Um, I think that there was also something I'm not too familiar with, but that was just kind of take a quick look because I put something down here about taxes. There was something included in the big, beautiful bill about taxes. I think as of July, they're going to be less taxed because I remember reading something about that. But that was something that was included in the big, beautiful bill. Um, so that's something to help cut taxes that are reported for tips and things like that.
Mm. Howard, we do have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you have to make to have to pay taxes on a quarterly basis? And they're asking to share the links to the tax-paying tools mentioned here. So I'll try to retrieve those here. And if you have
Okay.
any specific resources, Howard, just let me know for tax.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the IRS free file. So that's one that you could use. Free tax prep software, if you have that. I mentioned VITA. There's sites where you can get free in-person filing. It might be a little bit more challenging to do it like after like taxes, because usually most of these sites and stuff are, working right at the beginning when you have to file taxes. Um, so I would say those are like two main things. Um, so I know we're getting a little bit short on time, so I just want to talk about a couple more things. How does it affect Social Security? So when you're talking about the gig economy and affects Social Security, self-employment individuals and gig workers are responsible for paying their own Social Security and Medicare taxes on their income, which I discussed previously. This is because they're not employees of a company and therefore do not have these taxes automatically withheld from their paychecks. Like those of us who may have a traditional job that's already being taken out of each of our paychecks. Um, but it's best to consult a tax planner and a financial planning professional to determine the best way to handle tax decisions and payments. So let's kind of talk about a few final thoughts to help you navigate the gig economy. So as we talked about earlier, the gig economy can offer flexibility, autonomy, but it also requires careful financial planning and management. So really be sure as a gig, someone who's doing gig work, independent contractor, be sure to kind of budget conservatively when you're looking at your income. It's better to underestimate than overestimate and really make emergency savings a priority. Decide on a portion of your income that you want to save each month, set it aside in a separate account. This is going to help you build an emergency fund, save for the future. Really, we talked about, budgeting, keeping track throughout the month of your expenses, staying within your budget. We talked about using a budgeting app, a spreadsheet to help track your expenses. I mentioned, online tracking tools. Banks have their own programs and services as well. Um, since you won't have the aid of an employer for tax payments, medical benefits and retirement planning, as a gig worker or independent contractor, be sure that you're prioritizing those items in your budget, spending and savings plans, and really working with a financial advisor or a tax professional can help gig workers and independent contractors navigate, the unique challenges of this type of work arrangement. And, budgeting is a skill that takes practice. So be patient about working with it. So I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar and just wanted to give you our information. We highly, highly recommend that you schedule an appointment with one of us to talk about, a lot of different topics. I would say, we didn't really talk about, I would say, like the 5 areas that we focus on when it comes to personal finances. And this is just a list. There's more things that we talk about, but some of the basic things we're going to talk about: credit, how to improve your credit score, establish credit, debt. What kind of debt do you have? Effective ways to pay it down, prioritize, savings, budgeting, banking. If you don't have a bank account, let's talk about how to maybe get a traditional bank account. So we have here, you can schedule an appointment with us online, and here's our website. When you go in there, there's going to be a few service providers. Seemed like that just disappeared. And you can choose like who you want to talk to. We have some bios about us as coaches, online. You can also call to make an appointment with a coach. So we have our phone number here. And also, if you have any questions, please contact, use this address, and then we can get back to you. So these are probably the main ways to get to us to schedule an appointment. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. And kind of the last few minutes that we have, Chris and I or anyone else can try to answer some questions that you might have that you thought about. Hopefully you've enjoyed this presentation. I've been really excited to kind of share this webinar. We have more webinars that are going to be coming up, sponsored through the library. Jonathan showed you like the website. It lists, upcoming webinars that we have. So do we have any questions?
We do. And before the questions start, I just want to also put out there we have in-person sessions as well, at the library. And, we do phone sessions as well. We also offer virtual sessions where we could, share a screen and do that sort of meeting. So one question here is any budgeting or budget tracking apps that we might recommend? So, I mean, there's Rocket Money, there's You Need a Budget. I mean, the way it's a little, there are so many out there, and it kind of depends on, your preferences as a user. So it's really what I often do is have a client compare like two or three their experience because it's really hard to, say this will work for you. There's pros and cons of each, so it's really, yeah, that's how I kind of would answer that question. Howard, do you have any budget tracking apps that you would recommend?
Yeah, because like we are a nonprofit, we don't specifically, recommend one over the other. We can talk about maybe some options. I think Chris mentioned Rocket Money. Now the top budgeting apps, that I had written down here for actually 2025 include something called YNAB. There's also things like Monarch Money, Quicken, Simplify, and these are good for like personalized financial management. If you're just looking for something more basic, good budget, for envelope budgeting beginners, I've actually had some clients use that and they put money in an envelope, and it saves so much per month. Don't necessarily know. I always think it's more secure to put your money in a bank, but I have seen some of my clients use that. So I would say those are kind of some of the main apps that we have for 2025. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
And Howard, one participant did ask if they folks get access to the webinar afterwards. So Andrea did reply there that the slides are sent out and the recording, and also a link to sign up for the next webinar for those enrolled in today's session.
Great. So any last burning questions? I would say, definitely, again, I highly encourage to like schedule an appointment with one of our coaches. Um, you know, just very important if you don't have a spending plan, budget, want to work, on incorporating savings. We talk about, like I said, in the session itself, credit. I would say, because I've been doing this coaching now for like over 30 years, just what I've seen from clients, the number one thing is their credit. So I can get into a whole hour conversation about the importance of credit and your credit score. But definitely I'll save that if you want to come talk to me, one of the other coaches. As you probably know, credit today, they check your credit a lot of times when you're applying for a job. So important if you're looking for like an apartment rental, if you're looking to purchase a vehicle and get a loan, the higher your credit score is, the better interest rate you're going to get. Purchasing a home. So that's probably, if you were to ask me, what's the number one thing that I see clients coming to us for, is definitely credit. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Oh, yes, I would totally agree with that.
So if there's no other questions, I know we're right just about at the hour. Was there anything else that anyone wanted to add? Andrea, anything else? Jonathan?
Sure. Thanks, Howard. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Chris and Howard, for that great presentation. Um, Yeah, and once again, we really hope to see a lot of you sign up for a San Francisco financial counseling session, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. That is going to be on October 22nd from noon to 1, also hosted by Balance, and the topic is ways to trim your budget. So yeah, I'll go ahead when I send out the slides and the links and the recording, I'll go ahead and include the flyer to sign up for that webinar session as well. But yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining us, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. But Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add too?
Oh no, just thank you, Chris and Howard. That was fantastic. And I always look forward to your presentations here. Thank you again, and thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you,
everyone.
Howard from Balance, and Chris as well. So yes, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you at our next webinar.
Great. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.